What's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Mythic Conversations. Thank you all very much for joining me this evening. As always, I am your host, Jeremy Gerard. I'm a Mythic Legions collector and customizer who also has the distinct privilege of being the digital marketing manager for Four Horsemen Studios. That means that everything you see over at sourcehorseman.com is content that I help to bring you. If you want to follow more of my work, including some of the customs that we're going to look at tonight, you can certainly follow me on Instagram. It's at Mythic Customs, or check out my website, www.mythiccustoms.com. Of course, I'm also here every single Wednesday night live at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time doing this show, Mythic Conversations, weekly show about all things Four Horsemen Studios, and it is called Mythic Conversations because I want you to get involved as well. There is a chat in the YouTube window. If you have questions for me, if you want to comment on things I'm talking about along the way, please hit me up in that chat. I do my best throughout the course of the evening to answer those questions. Of course, if you're catching it on replay and you're not actually here live, you don't have the benefit of asking those questions, but I thank you all the same for tuning in and checking out this show. So let me see what's going on right here. A lot of people already hitting up the comments. Adrian starting it right out of the gate saying, let's see, backer 1594 in the building, made the Kickstarter by the hairs of my double chinny chin chin. Yeah, that's obviously a big piece of news here is the Mythic Legions Kickstarter, or the Kickstarter, I should say, for Mythic Legions Tactics War of the Aether Blade wrapped up just about an hour and a half ago. 6 p.m. Eastern Time is when that campaign wrapped up. It finished a little shy of 3 times the funding goal. So the initial funding goal was $100,000. That was met within the first 4 hours of the campaign. It ended up at about $281,000. A ton of awesome stretch goals were opened up along the way. The last stretch goal that was opened up was actually the addition of skeletons into the game. So that race of skeletons has been added. Last week on the show, I kind of looked at all the bonus stuff we were getting, all the extra armor sets. So we're going to get that race. We're going to get all those extra armor sets if you back the game already, either in the initial private crowdfunding campaign or as part of this Kickstarter. So very, very cool. Congratulations to Four Horsemen Studios and to the team at Great Hall Game Studios for a successful Kickstarter. For those that did back it, next steps is they're obviously going to go back. They're going to take a deep breath, I'm sure. But probably, fairly shortly, usually within a week or so, a couple weeks maybe, they're going to send out what's called a backer kit email. So this will be a little bit different than the private Kickstarter, the private crowdfunding, I should say, because that was all on their platform. Things were a little bit differently, and it was admittedly a bit of a learning process along the way with that. With Kickstarter, the process is really, really ironed out. They've done it before. So you're going to get something called Backer Kit. It's basically an email that'll say, hey, you pledged this much. You selected this reward. These are the extras you wanted. Is that still cool? Do you want to add anything else? At that point, you can't change your pledge going down. Like you can't say, no, I don't want those things, but you can certainly add more. So if you had to pledge a certain amount now, you want to add a little bit more later, you absolutely can do so. So once again, thank you. Congratulations to the teams. Thank you to everyone that backed and helped get that to the point. Super excited to get that game and get those awesome figures. A lot of people just saying hello and asking what's going on. What's up, everybody? Let's see what's up. Tony's saying, I look swimmingly handsome today. Thank you very much, Tony. That is very nice of you. I do have a very nice camera plugged in this evening. I've tried using this camera in the past, and it actually caused problems for me. So I'm hoping that I don't have to default to the camera that I have on the computer. I'm hoping that this does actually work. Rosedale say, what a long day at work. Finally time to unwind and enjoy the show. Incredibly happy that you get to spend your evening unwinding with me here. Very, very cool. Eric saying, can't wait to be at PowerCon Anaheim next weekend, hanging with the Four Horsemen team. Yeah, I really, really wish I could join you. I was very close to making the trip, but when it was said and done, I just couldn't swing it this year. Maybe next year. We'll see. Awesome. So one cool thing I wanted to mention that I did this past weekend was I did a Mythic meetup, right? So a few weeks ago, I was, on the Mythic Legions Cabal, and I got jealous. So I saw a bunch of people, a bunch of fans in the Mythic Legions community hanging out and meeting up, right? My good friend is from out in California, was apparently going on vacation to Colorado. So while he was in Colorado, he met up and he did a meetup with Nikki Nicole Cheney and with Anthony Velez of Noble Bear Customs. They both live in Colorado. So they all got together and had kind of a Mythic meetup. And that was super cool. And then I saw pictures of Walter Hagen and Elliot Lee from the Mythic Legions Cabal, two of my fellow moderators on the Cabal, saw that they hung out and spent some time together as well. And I was looking at this and I was genuinely jealous. I was like, I want to do that. I want to have a Mythic meetup. So, every week, obviously, I showcase the collection, or at least an angle of the collection here on the show. All my videos feature this, but I've never actually opened up the display and opened up the collection to have guests come over and hang out for the day. So I thought that'd be a lot of fun. So I put out a call on the Mythic Legions Cabal. I live in Rhode Island, contrary to popular belief. I don't live in Maine. I do actually live in Rhode Island. So I said, anyone in the Rhode Island area, that maybe wants to hang out and wants to do this Mythic meetup. And I mentioned what I was doing. And I got a number of people that reached out to me. And when all was said and done, I had 4 really awesome fellow Mythic Legions fans that decided to spend the day here at Castle Gerard, which is certainly not a castle, but it's fun to say that. So thank you very, very much here to Brent, Joe, Mike, and Eric, who hung out for the day with me. They got to, chill out and see the collection. I definitely, had some great conversation and answered some questions for them. They got to see some really cool stuff, some behind the scenes things of like where I do all my work, where my workshop is, in addition to the collection. And big thank you to Len from Wolf King Customs. Len put together some really nice prize packages or gift bags, whatever, for all of my friends that came to visit. You can see in this photo, they're holding up those shirts, a couple Cabal shirts, a couple Wolf King custom shirts. So super, super cool there. I had a blast. Hopefully I will be able to do it again at some point down the road, because I'd love to open up the collection and open up the showroom to some additional Mythic Legions fans and just spend the day chilling out and talking with all of you as well. So once again, thank you to my Mythic meetup friends. I had a blast. I hope you had as much fun as I did. Other news, we just cover the Kickstarter, obviously. Wolf King Customs has a sale drop coming up this Saturday, September 4th at 3 p.m. That drop's going to be a mix of a handful of new pieces. So if you've been following me on Instagram, you saw I posted earlier this week this crazy rabbit creature with fangs called a Wappletinger. And then I just posted today some additional shots of this samurai rabbit type character that we had done. As they're both part of the Burrows of Woodhaven series that I did with Walter DeMarco of Mass Customs, and certainly with Len from Wolf King. So there's going to be a number of new parts. Emil Wickman and Steve have some parts coming as well. Len's got a few new pieces, but by and large, this is not only those new pieces. This is opening up kind of the catalog and bringing back some of those old pieces. And there's a lot of new fans that are out there that are getting into Mythics, that are getting into customizing. And there's some pieces that haven't been offered on Wolf King Customs in quite a long time. So Len thought it would be a lot of fun to just kind of dig into that catalog and bring a bunch of stuff back. I do have a graphic here that I think is helpful. So this is a graphic that we put together that shows a handful of pieces. These are some of the pieces that are going to be coming back, and some of them are fairly recent. Obviously that Skeleton Jester and the Gargoyles, those are pieces that were just offered in the last sale. But we saw a lot of people, for instance, who passed on the Gargoyles because they were probably buying a bunch of other stuff. So you have to cut somewhere, right? But I've seen a lot of people saying they regret passing on those. So we're bringing those back, both of those gargoyle heads. Emil Wickman, he had a few pieces that sold out in the last sale, like the Angel Knight that you can see in the lower left-hand corner there. That sold out really, really fast in the last sale because the last sale did have limited quantities. On the side of the Angel Knight, you can see Luna Mudthump, the female goblin head and torso. Both of those parts will be back. Quantities will be unlimited. But additionally, the werewolf type customs, the Wolven customs, they'll be available. The God's Fire Fallen head, literally all the Kitsune parts, the regular Kitsune heads, the snarling heads, the ninja heads, those are all going to be back. Additionally, the updated version of the Kitsune tail will be available as well. So if you've ever bought the Kitsune tail, it's a really cool piece, but it's very, very heavy because it's solid resin. I find that if you're using it with like a goblin scale figure, it works fine because it tends to rest on the ground. But if you're using it with like an elf size figure, it's a bit heavy. So we went back to the drawing board. We kind of redesigned it a little bit. Essentially, it's partially hollow now to make it a lot lighter. The downside is it does have little holes in it because the liquid's going to drain out. And because it's partially hollow, it has to be cured on the inside. Len's going to be able to get an ultraviolet light in there. So if you're a customizer and you get it, you can either leave the holes as is. They're not that bad. You'll see them if you stare at them. Or you can always just plug them up with a little bit of, kind of putty or something and sand it down. Either one. Remember, this is Mythic Legion's customizing, so part of this is doing some work on the parts. But those who have been asking for the Kitsune tails, they will absolutely be back. And there's, again, a number of other cool stuff. The popular squid head, that's going to be back, painted and unpainted. So some very, very cool stuff. That, once again, is this coming Saturday, September 4th at 3 p.m. Eastern at wolfkingcustoms.com. Rich saying meat cleavers, I'll need 2. Yeah, those are actually fun. Those are the My Wife Is Gonna Kill Me podcast cleavers. So those were originally like Pete McCarthy came up with the idea for them. Steve actually sketched it out. I believe actually Walter DeMarco of Mass Custom sculpted it, and then Len printed it. So yet another example of lots of different artists and creative minds, kind of partnering together to bring that thing out. So very, very cool. It's a super fun piece. Jackrabbit Heads. There will be rabbit heads, the actual Jackrabbit, the big one. I don't believe we're doing that one. I think we're just doing the smaller one, like the original rabbit head in that same head, but with the samurai bun, and then the crazy looking like jackalope wobble tinger head. Do I know if the Four Horsemen will be bringing the PowerCon tributes to PowerCon? That is certainly the plan. That they should be there. They're there every single year. I haven't heard otherwise. Eric, yeah, lots of great parts for people that missed out. Awesome. Chris saying he hasn't been able to watch for the last 3 weeks, but he's back, and that's awesome. Happy to have you here, my friend. 1-6 Shooter saying hello, Trevor. Thank you very much for joining. Visionary saying, did I miss the Cosmic Legions reveal? Nope, Cosmic Legions has not been revealed yet. That is still planned, but nothing to reveal yet. Only the stuff that was shown last year at LegionsCon. Yeah, Trevor, skeletons were in lot, came right down to the wire. I was watching it right at the end there, was seeing how it ticked. And it was great to see that get unlocked. I know that was an important tier that's going to bring an even cooler level to the game, right? So what else for news? I think I've covered really all the main news I wanted to focus on. The Kickstarter, Wolf King Customs, Mythic Meetup, all that fun stuff, right? Tonight's topic, oh, actually, before I go to tonight's topic, let's talk a little bit about last week's topic, right? So thank you. I had a lot of people, a number of you, reach out to me personally and tell me how much you enjoyed last week's conversation. If you haven't watched it yet, last week's conversation was actually not really focused on customs at all. It was, I called it Adventure Time, and it was the idea of not collecting them all, but rather, having smaller collections and having really focused, like adventure parties, almost like a Fellowship of the Ring, like D&D adventure party. And you can certainly collect them all and have a display of those as well. It fits both scenarios. But what we did last week was I just kind of put together these adventure parties, told you why I selected the ones I did, and it was one of the more interactive shows we've had. I asked lots of questions of the audience, and there was a lot of audience engagement, which is always a lot of fun, right? So a lot of you reached out to me and said you really, really enjoyed it. Thank you for that feedback. Actually, knowing what kinds of shows you most like helps me plan out future shows and future episodes. So I'm definitely going to do a similar episode to last week's, but instead of focusing on heroes, we're going to focus on the villains, and we're going to create some cool villain teams. That will be down the road, but I'm also thinking of other similar topics, other similar conversations that I can do like last week because it was so popular. However, today's conversation is going to be around the birds. So if you saw the little kind of cover page when I first started the show, episode 59, I called it For the Birds, because today we're going to look at the Mythic Legions and actually the non-Mythic Legions birds, basically the avian warrior figures that have been released over the years by Four Horsemen Studios. And there have been quite a few. So tonight's going to be a little bit history lesson, a little bit just kind of talking about those figures and where they came from and my experience with them. I'm going to show some customs because I've done a handful of customs with the birds. So I'm going to show some of those examples. And I think we're just going to have a fun evening looking at some really cool toys, right? And part of the reason I decided to do this was because I posted an article on Source Horseman recently about the birds. And if you've ever seen the bird figures, they're kind of a mix, right? There are some birds, and they're all anthropomorphic type characters. I actually have one right here, the original one, the black raven, Decimus Haraben. And I don't know if that's how you say his name, but that's how I'm going to say his name tonight, Decimus Haraben. So this figure is, similar to most of the birds. They all have the same body. The only differences on them are the colors in their heads and the weapons that they carry. But the actual build of the birds themselves are all identical. And some of the birds, like the black raven, are definitely rooted in realistic birds, right? Besides the raven, they did a cardinal, they did a vulture, they did an owl, a few different owls actually, an osprey, they did a falcon, eagle. They did all of these birds that are, based on birds in our reality. But they also did some more fantasy type birds. And that was the article that I wrote recently at Source Horseman. I wanted to look at what I called the Mythical Avians. So they did figures based on mythical bird tech characters like a phoenix and, a quetzalcoatl and a griffin. All of those birds that are from all those avian type characters that are from kind of myth and legend. And what I realized was when I posted that, a lot of people came out and were really excited. And they were like, oh, I wish they would bring the birds back. I need this bird. I need that bird. The reality is the birds were released a really long time ago. So fans who are newer to Mythic Legions, outside of Eagleus, which has been offered a few times, there really has not been any birds that have been readily available for quite some time. So there's definitely an appetite for them out there, which is interesting because there was a point where the birds kind of went on clearance. They had a lot of them that they were having a hard time getting rid of. So we're going to talk about all of that tonight, look at customs, and have fun on this conversation. Very, very cool. Okay, so let's start with, where did these birds come from? So these birds, specifically this black raven, this character existed before Mythic Legions. This character and his fellow Avian warriors that came out as part of his Kickstarter were part of a line called Gothtropolis. So Gothtropolis was one of the in-house properties at Four Horsemen Studios prior to Mythic Legions. You're probably familiar. There's Seventh Kingdom. There's Gothtropolis. There was Magma Core. Those are all lines that actually had figures released for them, but they also had some other properties that didn't have figures made. And the way that these properties really got brought to life is through a voting kind of process that they called the Fantastic Exclusive. And this started all the way with their first figure, the Minotaur Zethius, back many, many years ago. I believe it was 2005 when they first did that. So what the idea was is they had a fan-fueled vote where they showed all different aspects of the figures that fans would select to narrow it down to the figure that would finally get released. And one of the first parts of that voting process was the actual property itself. So do you want Seventh Kingdom? Do you want Gothtropolis? Do you want Zodiac Pact? Do you want Symbiotech? These are all different lines or different properties they had back then. And then when fans would select one of those lines, Seventh Kingdom won the first and second votes. Then they would show a bunch of characters and fans would narrow it down. So that's how Zethius and eventually Ramathor the elephant were both selected. Well, one of the characters that won a fan vote for the Fantastic Exclusive was the Black Raven. Unfortunately, there was a problem when it came to release the Black Raven, and that was simply that the cost of producing action figures had skyrocketed in the year since the Four Horsemen started doing this. So all of those original lines that I just mentioned, they were very different to the business model that Four Horsemen Studios uses today. Obviously, we all know Mythic Legion started with Kickstarter, but even now with pre-order waves, they do something on the website on Store Horsemen, they solicit a new wave, fans place pre-orders, and then those figures are eventually made. Well, back in those early Seventh Kingdom and Gothtropolis days, these were produced where the studio would actually produce a set amount, get them shipped, and they would sell them as in-stock items. Now, clearly there's benefits and drawbacks to both of those models. The benefit of it being in stock, of course, is that fans get them right away. There's not a 6 to 12 month wait time. The downside is you don't know how many to order. You could vastly underestimate the desire for these figures and they sell out immediately, super fast. Or you can overestimate and things can actually stay stuck in inventory for a really long time. If you've tried to find a Gothtropolis Timekeeper figure now, they actually fetch a fair amount of money because the market and the community around Four Horsemen Studios has grown so much. But there was a point that those languished in the store. You could buy cases of Timekeeper figures at a severe discount. So clearly the idea of buying a bunch of product and hoping they sell, that's a business risk, right? With the cost of figures going up so high, the studio couldn't take that risk. And it wasn't until a friend of theirs named George Gaspar, who is now a full-time employee at Four Horsemen Studios and the namesake for the G-Con event, right? G-Con was actually named for George Gaspar, who's a longtime friend of the studio. George had done some successful Kickstarters for his toy kind of company called October Toys. And George said, well, did you guys ever consider using Kickstarter? I should, by the way, say that this time period that I'm talking about right now, I was not around as part of the studio back then. I was a super fan. I collected the stuff. So what I'm relating is the way I remember it. It's the way it's been told to me, but I was not there. So this is not a firsthand recollection as like being at the studio. So I say that in case I slightly mess up one, piece of the details. Please bear with me. I believe I'm representing it correctly. But that's my little disclaimer. So George introduced them to Kickstarter, and they said, okay, let's try it out. We think that this will be a good platform for us to gauge interest in this line. And that is how it all began. That first Kickstarter is the one that they ran to produce these figures. I'll actually bring it up right now because I have it on screen here. Let's see. We'll take a look at the figures that were available in that. And I remember this Kickstarter, I mean, very, very much. So this is the Kickstarter page here. And this is still, if you go to Kickstarter and you go to the Four Horsemen Studios page, this is still totally live. Obviously, you can't back it at this point, but it's still totally live as a historical campaign that you can look at. And you can see the Black Raven is right there. That was the main figure that was solicited as part of this wave, but there were other characters that were available as well. Actually, interestingly enough, another character from the Gothotropolis property, Scarabus, who commands a very high dollar amount now. They actually had leftovers of Scarabus when this Kickstarter ran, and one of the rewards you could get was actually a combo of the Black Raven and of Scarabus, and the Timekeepers. So we had the Black Raven as one. The Griffin was another one that was offered. The Falcon, Vulture, and the Cardinal. And then Minotaur the Duck was the Kickstarter exclusive. So this particular one was only available on the Kickstarter. There's a fun story behind Minotaur the Duck. Actually, if you check out Source Horseman, there's a Figure in Focus article on Minotaur the Duck and how that was essentially a message board joke that kind of took on a life of its own. But it's a fun read. I won't relate the whole story here. Let you go check that out after the show. So those are the main figures. There was also stuff like a Gothotropolis bust, but then we had these stretch goals. So as the pledges went up, I mean, one of the cool things about Kickstarter is as more and more people back and it gets more and more successful, obviously, stretch goals open up, which contributes to more success and more stretch goals. It's a really great kind of downward spiral to be in. But the White Raven, so a kind of repaint of the black one as the white version, that's super cool. The Quetzalcoatl, that is one of my favorite figures in the line, so much so I actually have a tattoo of this, not this character, but at least this head. I have a very large Quetzalcoatl tattoo wrapped around my leg. And when I got the tattoo, I got the tattoo not because of Four Horsemen Studios. I got the tattoo because I wanted a Quetzalcoatl tattoo. And when I was looking at different representations of it, I was trying to figure out how to represent the head, how do I want it to look? And I said to myself, oh, you're going to be kidding me. I have a perfect representation of this in my toy collection. So I actually brought this figure with me to the tattoo parlor, and it sat there watching me get this, his image inked on my leg. And I say he sat there. It was 5 different sessions of about 4 hours each to get it done. So he was there with me quite a few times, actually. But I love the Quetzalcoatl. The Phoenix is another one of my favorite characters, another one of those fantasy type birds. The owl, the rooster, and then of course Eagleus, which is one of the most popular figures that they've done. done. You see this character show up, especially around the 4th of July, in a lot of posts by people who don't even really know what it is. And then after the fact, they actually released a stretch goal of large wings because the figures themselves didn't have wings. If you look at all these photos here, they don't have wings. Actually, on their back as part of the armor, they have little tiny wings that are kind of part of the armor, but then they released a stretch goal for these large wings, also for the skeleton bone head and bone wings, and then a flamingo, which as you can see here, this is just a rough sculpture. This is before Four Horsemen Studios was doing things digitally. So this is an actual, sculpture, hand sculpted by, Eric at the studio. And during the Kickstarter, they didn't even have it ready to show. So this is what they showed as a stretch goal. But those were all the figures that were released during that particular line. Every stretch goal was opened up. I mean, I can remember there being a pretty extreme wait for these to come in, and you can see the large wings here, which literally they've used these wings multiple times now, obviously, in Mythic Legions as well. They did actually redesign the wing pegs because the original pegs, and if you ever buy wings or if you ever look at wings, this is a little kind of bit of not trivia, but just a little bit of advice. There were two kinds of wings. The ones that have a really small peg, a really thin peg, were actually made for the bird figures. They go right in those little ports there. Little wings pop out, and then these pop in. Later on, when they started doing these for actual Mythic Legions, they wanted to be able to use them in the shoulder pauldron ports. Well, that peg is way smaller than the shoulder pauldron opening is. So they redesigned these to have much thicker pegs. It's actually why any of the figures that come with back adapters, like every figure in Avian of Decay, they come with two different wing adapters, one that have larger holes and one that have smaller holes. The smaller holes are if you want to use the original wings, the larger holes are if you want to use the new wings. So if you ever get a bird figure and you want wings for it and you get them and they don't fit because the peg is too big, that's because you're trying to put one of the new style wings in the old style bird. If you have to do that, you have two options. You can either drill the hole in the back larger. That always scares me because you're literally messing with the toy itself, or you can always shave down the peg on the wing. I think it's easier to do the hole here, but you're damaging the figure, which is probably a much more expensive piece than the wings, which are probably a lot cheaper to get. Some of the wings are pretty expensive, but it's up to you. That's something that you can do if the wings don't fit. But very, very cool. I always liked the look of the birds with the wings. I always thought it added a lot to their display ability. So when the birds finally shipped, well after the Kickstarter, it took well over a year for them to get them in stock. Fans went crazy. And for me personally, this was a reintroduction to Four Horsemen Studios because I had collected Four Horsemen Studios from back in their McFarlane days, certainly into Seventh Kingdom, but I kind of fallen off. I was still collecting toys, but my focus had shifted a little bit. Spawn was no longer around, so I kind of shifted what I was collecting at that point. So I really hadn't gotten anything from Four Horsemen Studios in quite some time when that Kickstarter was solicited. And knowing the quality of their figures, I did jump in. I actually didn't back it all. I got maybe 5 different figures. I think at the time I got I got the Black Raven, the White Raven, the Quetzalcoatl, the Phoenix, the Vulture, and I think the Falcon. So I think I got 6 figures. But once I got them in hand, I was blown away. And I went out and I got literally every other one. And this was a point where you talk about the spike in Mythic Legions prices. This was a point where these figures started going for crazy money. Like every one of them was going for $300 to $350 with the wings. They were really, really hard to come by. They were just absolutely hot because a lot of people hadn't backed the Kickstarter. Again, I talk about the size of the Mythic Legions community. when the first Kickstarter happened, or even when Avian of Decay happened. Well, it was even smaller during the Gothotropolis Ravens Kickstarter. It was not a huge, not a huge customer base that were buying these things. So they were not produced in gigantic numbers. So when fans saw them, either whether they had completely missed out on it, totally, or whether they're like me and they had only bought 6 of them, and now they said, I need all of them. I want every single one of them. Prices definitely skyrocketed. Now, this was around the time that Mythical Legions was coming out. Mythical Legions was being solicited, and the success of Kickstarter on the Gothotropolis Ravens definitely allowed them to explore this other line, to bring Mythical Legions to us and have a set of some confidence that they could actually release that line and use the backing of Kickstarter to do it. And we all know that first Kickstarter was a huge success. The first wave, 30 some odd figures, really got us started with Mythic Legions in an awesome way. I always say that if it wasn't for those birds, I wonder if we would have Mythic Legions today. I can't say we wouldn't, but knowing what a success they had that opened the door to Kickstarter, opened the door to Mythic, I don't think it's a huge stretch to say that we owe a lot of this Mythic stuff to these birds. We really do, in my opinion. So the popularity of the birds allowed Four Horsemen Studios to go back and to release some more Avian warriors. So what they did was 2 things. They did Avian All-Stars, which Avian All-Stars remained branded as Gothotropolis, and they re-released 6 figures from that first line, right? That first wave. So they re-released the Black Raven, the White Raven, they re-released the Phoenix, the Quetzalcoatl, the Vulture, and the Cardinal. Those are all the ones that I believe got re-released. It's been a while, to be honest with you, since I thought of that wave. Let me look it up. I'll actually Google it while I'm talking here, because I can't remember if that, I think I'm correct. But I also could imagine that I got one wrong. Avian All-Stars. Let's see what comes up here. I'm looking for a graphic that would show me the wave, because this is something that's actually not on Four Horsemen Studios. It's not on Source Horseman, this particular wave, because it's not branded as Mythic Legions. The first wave that was branded Mythic Legions that had the birds was the Etheron's Dozen wave, which was actually solicited at the same time. So I think I got one wrong. Maybe the Phoenix wasn't released. I think the Phoenix wasn't released because they did the Blue Phoenix. What I missed was actually the Rooster. That's the one. So Black Raven, White Raven, Quetzalcoatl, Vulture, Cardinal, Rooster. That's who was in the Avian All-Stars. But they also did the Etheron's Dozen wave, which I will show you what that looked like right now. So this is the Etheron's Dozen wave, and this wave was definitely interesting. As much as I love that first wave, by the time this was solicited, I had actually started to get rid of some of my birds, because what I realized, like many collectors, is space became a premium, right? The birds with the wings take up a fair amount of space. And when you have like 13 of them on display, it gets fairly crazy and expansive. So I got to the point with the first wave that I started to say, you know what? I'm going to get rid of some of these. And like I got rid of the Flamingo pretty early on, because the Flamingo was always like, it was a fun figure, but it definitely doesn't fit in with some of the more, like vicious looking characters, I guess. And that was one of the challenges, I think, for me personally with wave 2, with Etheron's Dozen, is a lot of the birds in this wave, I felt they represented real life birds, but I didn't know that I needed action figures of them. I didn't know that I needed another chicken. Obviously we've got the toucan, we've got the parrot, we've got the pelican, and we've got the hornbill. Those were all ones that are originally I did not buy. I also didn't buy the blue phoenix because I had the red one that I really, really liked. Now, I did buy the osprey. I bought the blue jay, who's one of my favorites, and we'll look at him in a few moments. I bought the dragon, and I bought Etheron, who's the key of this particular wave. Um, Obviously, in Mythic Legion's lore, one of the factions is the Order of Etheron. So the heroic factions, the four heroic factions, are all named after what they call the great beasts. So you have Etheron, Basilia the serpent, you have Leodicius the lion, and you also have Xylona the stag. So we have seen two of those heroic characters already in the line. We've seen Xylona the stag in the Advent of Decay wave, but prior to that, we actually saw Etheron in this wave. So he is one of the key characters, one of the godlike characters in the lore of Mythic Legions. Super hard to find today. Very, very cool figure. I definitely hear a lot of fans saying that we want the birds back, but we most definitely want that bird back. The Dragon Draleon is another super popular. Now, I have picked up a couple of these since. Some of the figures I passed on originally, I have picked up since. I did get the White Owl Bubatros. I do have Minotaur the Duck now to go along with Minotaur. And I did get Scarletros, the parrot, which we'll look at why I bought him shortly when I kind of start looking at some of the customs. So that's all of them. That's the outlay of all the birds that have been done. The only two I didn't look at, they did do a couple exclusives. They did one called Dark Mist Decimus that was like a Comic-Con exclusive, which is basically the Black Raven, but done in like a transparent, clear, ghostly, smoky type colors. They did one called Nemetis, the Golden Eagle, that was very similar to Eagleus, but in kind of brownish type colors. That is probably the easiest one to find today. I do still routinely see Nemetis figures pop up for like in the $65 range. Not with wings, but I see that pop up every now and again, while some of the others have gotten pretty pricey. Now, what's interesting, and Eric just said, I'm going to say it, the birds don't do it for me. That's a fair point because they don't do it for everybody. And I think that's what happened when that Etheron's dozen wave hit. Some of those figures like Etheron and Draleon, they went really, really fast. Like people snatched them up. But a lot of those kind of just weirder birds, I mean, birds that I don't know that anyone was asking for a pelican action figure. Those stuck around for a while. And crazy as it may seem today, when we see how fast stuff goes in an in-stock sale, those figures languished in the store for quite some time, to the point that they hit clearance. That a lot of those figures actually were being cleared out for, I think, like $25 each at Four Horsemen at one point. Now, obviously, the market tends to rebound and correct itself. Try to find any of these birds today at that price, and good luck. They are very pricey today, and that's even, you can even find them. Just actually getting your hands on them is pretty tricky. So there's a lot of them. And yeah, I mean, so mindless focus, as a person from Louisiana, I need a pelican. A lot of people did gravitate towards ones that had a connection to their hometown or a sports team they like or something. So that became really, really popular. I know people picked them up for that. Ultimately, they're awesome figures. I still have a number of them. I probably have 10 of them on display at this point still. 9 or 10 of them. They're super, super cool. But beyond just the figures themselves, one of the things I started to do a couple of years ago was start to consider customizing them. Now, the birds are very different than Mythic Legions. They weren't meant to be modular in the way Mythic Legions are. So Mythic Legions from the get-go were meant to be popped apart and parts combined. I definitely will tell you that Four Horsemen Studios never expected the customs community to have been as big as it is. But the birds were not created with that in mind. Travis is saying a pink flamingo would have been cool. Actually, Travis, a pink flamingo was one of the first wave. The original Kickstarter had a pink flamingo and big giant pink wings. It's actually one of the harder ones to find today. It's really, really silly and crazy looking. Looks really, really cool if you put it next to the pink elephant from the Seventh Kingdom wave. Radio here saying, I want to sell all my Marvel Legends and start buying Mythic Legions, but I don't know if that's a good idea, especially since the aftermarket on Marvel Legends isn't too high. Well, as a collector, I can tell you that I have flipped my collection or pieces in my collection many, many times over the year. There are some pieces I've sold that I've gotten way more than I paid. There are plenty of pieces that I've sold that I've got way less than I paid. It's kind of part of the collecting game. What I always tell people is if you have something in your collection that's not bringing you joy anymore and you want to use it as a means to, build some income to buy something you're going to like more, to me, that's a big part of what collecting's about. So yeah, you're probably not going to be able to go on and say, hey, I want to trade my, Wolverine figure 1-to-1 for literally any Mythic Legions figure. But depending on how many you have and you sell it, you might be able to get yourself some really cool Mythic Legions. That becomes a personal decision. Hope that helps. Yeah, Curtis saying, start with an adventure party. Very cool. That's exactly what you can do. Get a small amount of selective ones that'll make a very cool display. But back to the birds. So they weren't meant to be customizable, but as I started getting into Mythic Legions customs, started looking at the birds and started to think, what could I do with these? Because the reality is they are, like I said, all very, very similar. They're all the same body styles, just with different paint applications and heads. So I started thinking, what can I do with customs? And what we're going to look at tonight is a handful of customs I've done over the years that have at least helped me add some variety to my display. So I do still have some on display, like what we have here. There's no customization to the Black Raven. It's a perfect figure as is. So I have him alone. Others I've done some simple things to. So this is my Quetzalcoatl that I mentioned, is Ramirez, actually named after Israel Ramirez, who definitely lobbied very hard for this amazing figure. So we owe him for this incredibly cool figure, at least partly. When Iz first came out, there were no green wings. When Iz first came out, there were red wings, and that's what I put with it, which didn't, it does make some kind of sense. He does actually have red feathers on the back of his head. So the red wings did kind of work, but when they did the Etheron's Dozen wave, the dinosaur-like figure, the Archaeopteryx, I'm sure I said that wrong, that figure was green, so they actually did do the green feathered wings. I liked the green wings better, but what I actually did here was just add a little bit of paint to the top of the wings so they weren't just one color. The wings too do tend to come in all one color, so I did want to add that little bit there. I also gave him a more appropriate weapon. This is actually a weapon that was sculpted by Kevin of Jim Panson Creations, something he did for one of his Masters of the Universe kits quite some time ago, long before Mythic Legions. But I thought that was cool and it was more character appropriate. So I gave him that kind of very Mesoamerican looking club weapon. So a lot of them are like that, but I've done a number of other customs as well over the years that we'll look at right now. Hopefully, if you do have some birds, maybe it'll inspire you to kind of, do some customs with them. If you don't have some birds, maybe it'll just make you want them that much more, which if that's the case, I apologize. Let me answer this question here. So I'm new to Mythic Legions and have some questions about the ogre-sized figure hips. I know it's not on topic, but I'm a little frustrated with Echrodron. So I know exactly what you're talking about. The hips are not independent joints. They move together. What you have to do to move them is you have to move them both at the same time, and then you have to move one of them. If you're on the Mythic Legions Cabal, Brian Brink did a wonderful video that shows all about the ogre scale hips. It is something that the studio is well aware of, the way that it was designed. It is something they have said before that they are looking at changing possibly for subsequent ogre releases. I know we're going to get the ogre scale brute in Alithia. I do not know if that has the same hip configuration or not, but that is the thing. If you try to move them like independently, you will break it. You do have to move them both, and I don't have an ogre right here, but you do have to move them together, and then you can move the other one down. Again, if you look up that video from Brian Brink on the Mythic Legions Cabal, that will certainly show you. He takes the whole thing apart to show you how the joint works. There have been other people that have pulled it apart and shaved it down and really gotten crazy to eliminate that. I can tell you, I've got quite a few ogres in my collection. I've never had that problem. I've never had to go to that extreme. Just by knowing how to position them a little bit with that joint has been fine for me. So hopefully, M. Farrell, that works for you. Tony saying, is Eagleus or a Gallus, I've heard it pronounced both ways, part of ML lore? No. To be honest with you, none of the birds outside of Etheron are part of Mythic Legions lore. So if you look on the Four Horsemen website, the birds are all listed in the checklist because they were part of a Mythic Legions branded wave. So the Gothotropolis birds are not listed because it's a Mythic Legions checklist. But if you go by factions, none of the birds are actually in the factions. And that's by design. Originally, I had put them, when we built the website, I had put all the birds in the Etheron faction because they're part of Etheron's dozen. And Eric actually had asked me to take them out. For a legit reason. It made Etheron's dozen it made that faction look huge, right? Because there were 12 birds that were just thrown right in there. And he didn't want that faction because, obviously he's got storyline in mind. He didn't want that faction to seem something other than what it was. So realistically, the only bird that's officially part of the lore is Etheron. Awesome. You're very welcome, M. Farrell. And if I'm saying your name incorrectly, my apologies. Okay, so let's look at some customs. So one of the first ones that I did was for the Blue Jay, okay? Thought the Blue Jay was a really cool figure. It was actually one that I really wanted. I almost did a custom Blue Jay using the Cardinal from the first wave. A Cardinal and a Blue Jay have very similar type heads. So I thought, you know what? I can get this and paint it blue. I can totally make a Blue Jay. And I wasn't the only one to think that. Actually, the Four Horsemen considered doing the same thing. If you look at the Etheron's dozen wave, a number of those figures are just repainted head sculptures. So the Phoenix is just a repainted version of the first Phoenix. The Osprey is just a repainted version of the Falcon, right? They were going to do the Blue Jay doing a repainted version of the Cardinal head, but then they started looking at the two birds and they said, well, you know what? They're actually not identical. There are some differences. So let's do a brand new head. I really liked the Blue Jay. And when I was looking at it, I decided to play up on a character in a book that I had read called Inkheart. So there's a series of book called the Inkheart series, Inkheart, Ink Spell, and Ink Death, I think it's called. They did make a movie out of Inkheart a number of years ago that had Brendan Fraser and Andy Serkis in it. It's actually not a bad movie at all, but they unfortunately only did the first book. They didn't do the rest of them. And the rest of them are actually really good. Paul Bettany's character plays a character called Dustfinger in the stories. That's an awesome character who gets even better in subsequent stories. But spoiler alert, in subsequent stories, the main character in the books, his name is Mo. He becomes kind of a bandit character called the Blue Jay. So again, I find inspiration in lots of different places. So I thought of this idea of the Blue Jay bandit, the Blue Jay being a bandit in these stories. I said, well, what if I take this actual Blue Jay and I make him kind of a Robin Hood-like bandit character? So that's what I was going for here for the first custom that I'm going to look at tonight. So this is my Blue Jay bandit. And what I did here, it's just a Blue Jay base body. One of the biggest things I did was add those paint applications to the wings. So we just looked at the little bit of red paint that I added to my Quetzalcoatl figure. But on this one, I wanted to go even in more. So I added some of those black feathers. I did a little bit of dry brushing to add those white feathers, did some white around the tips just to give those wings a little bit more life, a little bit more color to them. That was more in line with actually how a blue jay looks and how some of the wings, some of the paint details on the feathers on the character's arms are. Besides that, I put this is right around this time when I was doing this custom was when I was really starting to experiment with other toy lines. You can see that he's got a Lord of the Rings vest on there. He's got a Lord of the Rings quiver of arrows and a bow. That sword is actually from a Muppets Captain Smollett figure. So I started, this is an early example of me really starting to experiment with bringing in different toy lines into my customs to really get accessories and get pieces of the customs that I didn't already have available to me in the Mythic Legions line. Let me show you one more shot. I have two more shots actually because they're together of the Blue Jay, and you can see his back as well. So you can see there not only his accessories, but now you can see the quiver on his back, and you can see some of those paint details that I added to the wings. But this was really that first experience. And when I put this guy back on my shelf next to my other avians, he immediately stood out. And this is what started that spiral for me. Where it really started me saying, like, you know what? These figures don't all have to look identical. I can start playing around with these. I can start adding new elements to them to create some really cool, different types of characters. First example here. Another one that I did, which is the same principle of let's add things onto the character to change the type of character it is. Because at this point in the original Gothotropolis wave, none of these characters had biographies, right? They all were just generic type characters. So I don't know, what the Phoenix's story is or what the Cardinal's story is. They were just birds. With Mythical Legions, when we started to get these characters that have all these rich different stories, and they have what I would consider like, character classes and things like that, I started to think about that for the birds. So turning the Blue Jay into a bandit, that was a first step. The next one I did was looking at the vulture. I said, well, vultures often are associated with death, with being scavengers and stuff like that. So I said, what if I turn the vulture into kind of more of like a death mage type character? So that's what I did here. And again, back to those those Lord of the Rings parts. This uses that hood and that robe type thing that I got. I'm trying to think. It was from a Lord of the Rings ring wraith figure. So pulling those off, those are like a rubbery type plastic piece. Pulling those off and just adding them to the vulture with that kind of staff that's just a Mythic Legion staff with a skull popped on top. That again allowed me to add a little bit of visual differentiation to this bird, to this figure, so it once again stood out on the shelf. Yeah, Eric saying, I've seen the Jay custom a few times, but I didn't know how significant he was in your customizing career. Yes, a lot of those old pieces that I have that are still, the Blue Jay's right up there. He's still in the collection. I learned so much back then. And it's one of the things that I tell, especially new customizers as they're getting into this is, the only way to really get better is to do the work, is to get in there and to make customs and make mistakes and learn new techniques, right? I saw Eric Miller actually post something in the Cabal recently where he found a skull head, like a Ghost Rider style head that he painted, I think it was a few years ago, and he compared it to a new skull head he had painted today. And he said that, you have to suck for a while before you can get good. And to be honest with you, his suck head was actually pretty good as well. It wasn't like it was, just horrible. It was not a bad paint job. Obviously not where he is today. But that all being said, it was a good representation of you learn so much over time. As you do this work, you will pick up lessons. You will pick up ideas. The creativity fuels itself. So that was definitely an important custom because it taught me a lot along the way, for sure. So let's look at another one here. What do I have next lined up? So the next one I have lined up was, so far we've looked at, I took the blue jay and I added stuff to it. I took the vulture and I added stuff to it. Well, my next step was saying, can I make a bird that's not already in the line already, a different kind of bird? So I made myself a dove. Now, I made the dove for a very specific reason. When you watch the show, and actually I'll take this off for just 1 second here. When you watch the show, and you can obviously see the tattoos peeking out from under my arms, I actually do have a series of bird tattoos on my arms, and you can see here, this is actually a very large phoenix that's tattooed on my arm, and then on the inner part of my arm, there's actually a black raven, and I'm not going to take my shirt off, but on my chest, there's actually a dove, and it's just part of my personal belief, and it's kind of meant to, for me, represent kind of, the circle of life. And it represents that, if you live a good life, and the dove, it represents, living a good life. Actually, the tattoo, the dove is actually holding a banner in his mouth. And on the banner, it says, benevolence, mercy, charity, and forbearance, which are the four character traits that Jacob Marley says he should have lived his life by in A Christmas Carol. So the dove on my chest is carrying a banner with those four words, those four traits. It represents to me personally living a good life. And if you live a good life, then when you die, and that is represented by the raven, you'll be born into something better. And rebirth is represented by the phoenix. So a little bit of a deep conversation there, but that is why I have that tattoo. That is what it means to me. So personally, in my collecting life, I already had a phoenix and I already had a black raven. I said, well, you know what? I want a dove because I've got tattoos of all three of those birds. I actually want a dove. So that's why I went ahead and I did this dove custom. I imagine the dove being a mage-like character. So I actually used the base figure here is the osprey, and I painted it white. I gave it, kind of that pink bill. I painted the feet pink with the white feathered wings. And then the soft goods on this are from a couple different Lord of the Rings figures. The lower part here is from an Aragorn figure. It's actually one of the ones that came with one of the horses. The soft goods allowed him to more easily sit on the horse, where the upper part is from I believe, Gil-galad figure. So again, digging into my Lord of the Rings fodder box to pull them out to create this dove figure. So you see the progress here. I'm going from just adding accessories onto the birds to flesh out those characters more and give them more personal stories, to the one here where I'm creating a whole new kind of bird. So these are some of the things that I've done over the years to have fun with these characters. Now, I got a handful more to show. Let's see here. I showed earlier the parrot, and I said that I'd originally passed on the parrot. I said I didn't really want that figure. But a while ago, I did a series of pirate customs. And I was creating all these different pirate captains, and I wanted them to be distinct. Like I did one that was, a human type character. I did one that was a female. I did one that was a skeleton. I did one that was a dwarf. And I really liked the idea because when you think about the character traits, the super generic character traits of pirates, right? Peg legs, eye patches, parrots. Okay, parrots are a super generic aspect of pirates. So I thought, how fun would it be to take that like total character trope of a parrot and make the actual, not make a pirate that has a parrot, but make the bird the actual pirate. So of course, I at that point was like, oh, I'm gonna get myself Scarletros. Now, this was the point after they had been cleared out. So they were no longer $25. I had passed it up at $35. passed it up at 25, and now this thing was fetching in the neighborhood of $100, and that's ended up what I had to pay for it. The rest of the gear he has here, it actually all comes from one figure. Conveniently, it's all from a Pirates of the Caribbean Captain Teague figure. That's the character that Keith Richards played, Jack Sparrow, or Johnny Depp's father character in the movies. I really liked his red coat and all of his weapons, his hat. All of that worked really, really well with this parrot. This is actually one of my favorite of the bird customs I've done, because I just think it's so well realized as a complete character. It came together really well, looks really cool with the figures I have him displayed with, and I can't look at it and not crack a smile because it's pretty darn silly. So I really do like that character. Now, that was the first one we've seen that didn't have the big wings, right? So this was a point too where I started thinking about, well, what other bird-like characters can I make? Now, I went through a phase, I've said this before, where Dungeons and Dragons really is one of the influences for it's one of the influences that makes me like Mythic Legions as much as I do. There was a point where I was trying to build out new customs and I was looking for new sources of inspiration. And one of the places I found a ton of inspiration was in different kinds of races and character classes and so forth for Mythic Legions, for Dungeons and Dragons. And one of the races that when I was a kid and I played D&D, I didn't remember this race. Now, they existed because I've gone back and looked them up, and they certainly were in, I'm not sure if they were in the Monster Manual or the Fiend Folio, which was another monster book, but they certainly were a monster that was available, and it was a kind of a character called a Kenku. So I'm going to show you my Kenku custom, and I'm going to talk a little bit about this type of creature because they're really freaking cool. Or they're really unique, I should say, at least. So this was the Kenku character that I created. And you can see that this uses the Black Raven body, but it's not a full Black Raven body here. I wanted to change the proportions a little bit. So underneath that robe, it is actually using a Mythic Legion's torso. So let me take this off screen for a minute. I'm going to show you what I mean, because I do have some Mythic Legions parts here. So what I've got here, this is a Mythic Legions 2.0 torso, right? This torso, and I've got some bird legs here. This torso actually fits the peg of this bird leg perfectly. And this was something that I believe was first discovered by my friend Patrick Boyle. Patrick Boyle put together a Harpy custom, and I'm going to show my Harpy customs in just a moment, but he put together a Harpy custom by combining the torso of a Mythic Legions figure with the legs of one of the birds. Cannot be a coincidence that these pieces go together. Now, one thing I will tell you is the legs of the birds, if you look at the legs here, it comes with this waist piece. This waist piece has these two like fins that kind of come up, and the waist of the birds is very thin and it fits right between those those little ridges there. Well, unfortunately, the wider 2.0, it does not fit. You could kind of cram it down and push them aside, but it looks a little hokey in my opinion. So what I've always done when I do this combination is, instead of using the waist piece from the birds, I just use a Mythic Legions waist piece. And that, to me, makes a better transition there. Now, not only do the legs fit, but the arms, if you pull the arms off of the birds, and they do come off, they're not as modular and as easy to pop off as Mythic Legions, but if you use a little bit of heat from, say, a hot air dryer, you can absolutely get them pulled out. What you're going to do is this plugs right into these ports here. So you can actually put the bird arms and the bird legs on a Mythic Legions figure. The downside is the heads don't work. The heads are totally larger. If you try to put them on, they don't fit. They are misshapen. So there's a little bit of a connection problem there. But For my custom here, for my Kenku, that wasn't a problem because I have the robe. So in Dungeons and Dragons, the Kenku are these flightless birds, and their story is that they were robbed of flight many years ago. They were robbed of their wings because of some great crime that they did. While the crime itself has been forgotten, the curse itself has not. So they do not have the ability to fly. They are flightless birds. Now, they speak they can mimic sounds. So a lot of, if you look up Kenkus in Dungeons and Dragons, a lot of them have names that are based on sounds, kind of like Thump does, the goblin. But you'll see that they have Kenkus that their names are like, bowstring, thwick, and stuff like that. They have names that are very similar to the sounds that they may hear, but they mimic sounds. They are weird, creepy little characters. They're often, thieves. They're often, very, unreputable type characters. All things that I always think are really interesting in character designs. So as I discovered this character, I discovered Kenku. I said, you know what? I totally want to make a version of that. And that's what we see here on the screen. Curtis saying, I just watched the trailer for Inkheart. I'm going to have to watch that movie this weekend. It looks cool. It's not a bad movie at all. It's a pretty faithful representation of the book. And the movie was done in such a way that I will tell you there's 2 more chapters. There's 2 whole more books. The movie ends at least in a way that you're not left thinking like, oh, goodness, they left me on a cliffhanger. It's okay, but the story does progress. So there are 2 books after that as well. Okay, know what that comment is. Back to the birds. Let's see what else we got to look at here. I got a few more that I'll show you that I've worked with. So as I just mentioned the harpy here, so I'll show you that really quick. So these are the first harpy customs that I did after I saw Patrick talk about the fact that these 2 figures went together. It was right around the time that the Melina figure was released, and I've said this a number of times, but I do not display the PowerCon tribute figures as the PowerCon tribute figures. So I'm always looking to do something different with them. And when I got this particular figure, I had an extra Nemetis, the Golden Eagle, in my collection. That's where those legs and those wings come from. Just by combining those legs with the Melina figure, the blue on the Melina figure actually matches the blue on the Nemetis figure very well. I just loved that combination. And to me, like I was just talking about with the Kenku, it created a totally new classic type character for my display, right? Because harpies are not only a classic character in Dungeons and Dragons, they're a classic character in Greek mythology and all that. So it was very fun for me to add that there. Tristan just said, I made a Kenku arcane trickster that was really annoying because he was always repeating everyone like a parrot. That's funny. Until the end of the campaign, when I revealed that he could speak normally the whole time. That's a great character trait. The fact that he was just kind of trolling everyone the whole time, the entire campaign. That's great. So that's one of the harpy customs I did. And again, it uses that exact principle that I just showed you. Just a Mythic Legion's upper torso 2.0 plugged in to the bird feet, and you can absolutely have. I didn't use the bird arms in my harpy. I kept it with the Melina's arms, but you could do either one you wanted. I also did a second harpy that was more of my heroic version of a harpy, and that's right here. So that obviously uses the Gwendolyn Heavens brand figure. That helmet and stuff. The chest plate is actually from a Artemis silver cord, and the wings and the lower legs are from a Vultus figure. So that is my more heroic type harpy character. On the subject of the more mythical type creatures. We looked at Draleon the Dragon. So Draleon the Dragon is one of the coolest figures that have come out for the birds, even though it's not really a bird. Beautiful paint scheme. It's got these really nice shimmery purples. The wings that came with him are gorgeous as well, shimmery purple wings. But they always bothered me because as cool as they looked, they were feathered wings. Now, I know there was a precedent for feathered dragons in mythology. Obviously, a lot of Asian dragons have feathers, but the head of Draleon always looked more like a European dragon to me, which don't generally have feathers. So I displayed it as that, but I always wanted it to have more dragon-like wings. I've seen some people using the new demon bat-like wings, but one of the ones that I did a while back, I actually got an extra Draleon, and I had an extra set of wings for a Masters of the Universe Lord Dactyls figure. So this is my kind of like mage like Draleon character that I did. You can see that I repainted those dragon wings. It was a wonderful paint job to do. I loved doing these just because I got to use a lot of these different like metallic paints to create this almost like shimmer type effect. It's one of those things that came out so much better than I expected it to. Put a little cape on his back, gave him a spell book and a little staff, and this character completely transformed into a draconian style mage for me. So Radio Demon Swing is saying, what should my Mythic Legion starter figure be? I'm looking for knights or gladiators. Well, if you want one right now, I do agree with Curtis that the Magnus figure is pretty readily available. There's also the Red Shield Soldier. So Red Shield Soldier comes with 3 different heads. If you see the frog look, it's called a frog helmet. If you see that and you don't like it, because there are some people that don't care for that head. He does come with 2 other heads, one that's more of a bucket knight and one that's more of like a kind of traditional knight helmet where the visor would flip up. That's a great one. It's an awesome figure, great one to start with. Magnus is in gold armor because of the great, unhelmeted head sculpture as well as a bucket helmet. So from a knight standpoint, those are both available. There are no gladiators that are available right now. If you want to pre-order, there is the wave called Deluxe Legion Builders. There is a gladiator in that wave that is very, very cool. Awesome. So the last thing that I'll look at here tonight is just kind of thinking about other ways to use bird parts, and specifically when I think bird parts, I think the wing. So one of the things I've done over the years is use the wings in a few different ways. I did a show a couple weeks ago now, a couple months ago, on different angels. And the angels here, I got a couple angels on the screen here. I've got my more heroic, classic looking angel on the left, and I've got my angel of death on the right. Both of those are ones that use the different wings, the white wings and the black wings. So as I started customizing the birds, starting to think about their component pieces and how they could be used, not only to make like the harpy, but also to make other kinds of characters where the feathered wings would be available. Now, I did both of these customs long before Gadriel was ever revealed and official angels came into the line. Yep, Curtis saying Vetus might still be available. Vetus, whether or not he's a gladiator or not, and he's got that very Spartan type look to him, so he could certainly fill the bill as well. The last one we'll look at here, looking at those wings, was a fun custom that I did a few years ago for Halloween. I did characters all from a story by Ray Bradbury that I love called The Halloween Tree. And one of the characters in Halloween Tree, there's a skeleton and a witch, and There's a gargoyle. So I did customs of all those characters, some of which I already had. But one of the ones I needed was they did like an 8-man. So I had this head that Saba Dom from Planetary Dog Toys had done, and I used that to make my flying monkey type character. Obviously, very Wizard of Oz-esque, but using a Gonk's body with that monkey-like head, a tail from one of the Jagularian figures, and then actually using the wings, but like splitting them in half. So one thing I will show you here is the wings themselves, and I'll pull this wing out. The wings themselves are made of 2 separate pieces, right? So you can extend the wings and kind of put them in a flight pose. You can pull this larger piece off if you want, and it makes actually a smaller wing. It's actually very similar to what the Horseman did for the Malfar little demon figure. The Malfar little demon figure uses just the lower part of the big demon wings with another little tiny attachment as opposed to the big full wings. Using that same principle is what I did here to make those wings not be as huge and fit more appropriately on this particular one. Very, very cool. So that's my look at the bird figures tonight. Hopefully you enjoyed kind of that, run down memory lane with me as we looked at, where the birds came from, how they got introduced into both the Mythic Legions line and the Gothtropolis line, the role Kickstarter played in bringing these, and then certainly my personal journey from buying those bird figures for my own collection, springboarding that into starting to customize them to where I stand today, where I have a nice mix of some of the figures as is, the Cardinals as is, the White Raven, the Black Raven, Etheron. Those are all untouched, and then others like you saw tonight that I've had some fun with and created some different characters. So that's my topic for the evening. I definitely have a little bit of time left. If you have some questions, if you want to hit me up and ask me some things about what's going on in the world of Mythic Legions or Mythic Legions customizing or what have you, I'm happy to answer some questions for a few minutes before we call it an evening. And with that, I'm going to take a drink because I've been talking for almost 90 minutes. Awesome. We need another Legions Cast episode soon. So apparently we're going to be recording one tomorrow night. So stay tuned for that. Doesn't mean it's going to get posted tomorrow night, but apparently we are going to be doing a little get together tomorrow night to record. So you'll have one before you know it. So Dan's saying, I want to get extras from the 3 pre-ordered waves through Legion Shop. Well, thank you very much. When are they available? When will you get them? And will they ship out before BBTS? So they're available for pre-order now. On Legion Shop, we actually have the Alithia wave, the All-Stars 4 wave, and the Deluxe Legion Builder wave that are all available for pre-order. When we will get them, that really depends. All of the most recent fulfillment info is on storehorseman.com on the release schedule page. It's also on Source Horseman on the release schedule page, and it's on Store Horseman at the bottom. All the dates you see there are the ones we get as well. Will we ship them before BBTS? It really depends. These things have a street date on them. They're supposed to have a street date. So all retailers are supposed to be able to ship them around the same time. It really depends versus when we get them versus when BBTS gets them. I can tell you that as soon as we have them and we are able to ship them, we will do so. I will say that Legion Shop ships all the parts from here in Rhode Island, but actual pre-order figures ship from Joe's office in New Jersey, and Joe's office in New Jersey is not too far from the warehouse. So when our orders come in, we just go pick them up. So does that mean we're going to ship them out sooner rather than later? There's a street date. We'll ship them out as soon as we can. But thank you very much for your interest in Legion Shop, and I hope you will place that pre-order. Okay, so I just hit the wrong button, and I think I knocked myself out of the studio for a moment, but I'm back. So, Radio Demon Swing, where should I go to find affordable Mythic Legions? So, if you're looking for figures that are in stock now, register at storehorseman.com and try to be a part of the in stock sales on Fridays. They are fast and furious, but that's the best way to get them. Outside of that, your best way is to pre-order. I will tell you, you've asked a number of questions tonight, clearly as someone who's new to the line, which is awesome. Check out sourcehorseman.com. There is actually an article on sourcehorseman.com called How Do I Get Started Collecting Mythic Legions Figures that will answer, I think, a lot of your questions as a new fan to the line. So hopefully that will help you out. Let's see. Is everything still on for Q3 with Q4 with the last few waves? Latest details are all on the website. So anything I can reveal is already there. Did it again. Knocked myself out. I apparently am clicking the wrong thing tonight. Curtis with a good question. What can we expect in terms of streaming options for Legions Con for people that can't attend? I'm still trying to figure that out, to be honest with you, Curtis. One of the original plans, right, for Legions Con was we were going to do a bunch of panel discussions and we were going to broadcast the panel discussions, for free online. We might be rethinking panel discussions. I think we frankly are, only because, with everything going on with COVID right now, we are still having the show. Safety precautions are going to be observed, but where we were going to do the breakout sessions is a smaller room. We were going to have, chairs lined up where people would sit there. And the idea of having people sit elbow to elbow, on a bunch of folding chairs doesn't seem appropriate with everything going on right now. So as of right now, I think we're going to be rethinking what we're going to do with those actual those sessions. So exactly what we're going to be able to broadcast, I'm not positive yet. We definitely want to be able to bring content to fans that can't be there. At the very least, what I'd love to do is, because Saturday at Legions Con is a much quieter day, I do hope to just maybe chat with some people that day, maybe spend a few hours and just do a live broadcast, and just whoever's around, grab Nikki, grab Dennis, grab Walter, and just, have quick conversations with them about what's going on, and broadcast that. I absolutely want to make it available to people that can't be there live. So we're going to try to do what we can. So thanks for that question, Curtis. That was definitely a good question to ask. Awesome. Yeah, Adrian, I disappeared again. I know. Flew away. Fabian saying, just want to say thanks for the Wendigo. I'm in love. Well, thank you very much for your support. We are working hard right now to restock those demon ogres and those Wendigos on Legion Shop. Yeah, Trevor saying, put some tape over that button. That's the worst part, Trevor, is I don't know what I hit. Like, I don't know. I think I might have accidentally right clicked the pad, the touchpad, instead of left clicked it. But this is episode 59. I've been using the same laptop the entire time. I've literally never done that. So how tonight I just decided 2 times in a row to knock myself out of the broadcast studio, that's kind of crazy. But I did learn something. I did learn that if I knock myself out of the broadcast studio and I'm the only one here, it doesn't just stop the broadcast. So that is good to know. You're very welcome, Curtis. My pleasure. Yes, Adrian, the end of the show is the best time to make a mistake. I imagine if this was like the Muppet Show, this is where all the collateral chaos would start happening and, things would go awry. So absolutely. Dan saying, got my painted Vampire Sentinel head from Legion Shop. We'll definitely order more from Legion Shop. Well, thank you very, very much, Dan. And I promise everyone watching, I did not pay these people to come on and say nice things about Legion Shop. This is not just shameless plugs. Thank you very much. We put a lot of effort into the shop, trying to make it a resource for Legions fans. We have so much more cool stuff coming up in the months to come. So thank you to everyone that supported. We did a big sale drop in August. Definitely had a lot of cool stuff. We're working on restocking some stuff now for September. We do have some new things that are going to be hitting. I mentioned a few weeks ago that Draleon Studios that do those really cool custom weapons and those cool display mats for photography and display, that they're going to be coming on to Legion Shop. My order from them should probably be here maybe next week. So we do have a number of those items coming in stock, including unpainted versions of those weapons and the Legion Shop exclusive version that I showed previously that I happen to have right here. So this particular piece here that is similar to some that they've done both of these swords, and this is a kind of longer sword and a shorter sword. They've done these previously with single sheaths that they go in, but we're going to have them with a dual sheath where they're together, so you can actually put them as a really cool display piece where you can put them together. So we're going to have these as well. This will be a Legion Shop exclusive. All of those should be in about, like I said, a week's time or so, and we will be restocking stuff. I know a lot of people have asked for the weapons from Detour Customs. Those should hopefully be on the way to us next week as well. And then also the troll heads from Immortal Collections. Was talking to them today. They are hard at work getting those printed, getting those painted. Hopefully before the end of September, we will have those back in stock as well. I've got a number of requests for that. If you do see something, by the way, on legionshop.com that you want that is out of stock, there is a function called Notify Me When Available. If you use that, a minute that we put it in stock, the minute I add inventory, you will get an email saying, hey, the item you were interested is in stock. I will tell you that if you get that email, act on it, right? Because we use those in-stock requests as a guide for how many more we should order. We order extras, but other people that maybe didn't use the notification are going to buy them as well. So if you do see that notification and you do want the item, don't sleep on it, act on it. Very, very cool. Pop the Wendigo head on a McFarlane Demogorgon. Perfect combination. I'll give you a little sneak peek. I popped that head on something today that is super cool that we're working to get into the shop for hopefully September. Really cool combination of pieces that I think people are going to be pretty excited for. Very cool. Rich saying, since PowerCon's on the West Coast, how much will the limit on figures be at the Four Horsemen booth? I don't know the answer to what they're doing right now. I will tell you that in the past, they didn't treat PowerCon like a normal show. They didn't bring a giant display of figures to PowerCon. In past years, all they had at PowerCon was the PowerCon exclusive debut figures, which were one of each per person, and they sold out pretty quickly. I don't know if they're bringing a whole bunch of stuff out there this year to sell or what. So I can't tell you what to expect from that. I mean, I know that when we do ToyCon, stuff gets loaded in the truck and just driven over because it's like 10 minutes away. So anything they sell out there, they have to actually like fly out there. They have to, freight it out there. So I don't know how much they're going to do. They usually use PowerCon as an example, a time to go out there and be part of that community as opposed to like a real selling focused show. So keep that in mind when you go there. There's probably not going to be the normal display of figures to buy. Awesome. Bring back the birds, someone's saying. Yeah, very, very cool. So I'm going to wrap this up. Let me see the last few questions here. Yep. So Trevor, you just asked restock on the ogre head. As I mentioned, we are hard at work on those right now. Those are without a doubt the most popular requested piece we have to be restocked, and they are gorgeous. When I got them actually in, Carlo did an amazing job on sculpting and printing that piece. It was a knockout. I want one for myself. Like I almost kept one of them, but I didn't want to deprive customers of them. And I said, you know what? I can get one down the road. I will sell all of them that they sold me. They sold out pretty quickly. We do have a few unpainted ones left in stock, but the painted ones went really, really fast. And that's what we're working on stocking now. Curtis saying, I'd love a Midwest convention. Yeah, you never know. Any idea what the in-stock sale will be Friday? I don't know if there is an in-stock sale Friday, to be honest with you. That hasn't been announced yet. Obviously everything just happening today with the end of the Kickstarter. I know that there was a little bit of a delay with stuff going on in the warehouse for, everything with the Aerothere in stock a little while ago. But, Chris and I are talking about what the plans are for the coming weeks. Obviously they're going out to PowerCon. That has an impact. So figuring out exactly what that's going to look like. But if you're signed up for the email, you'll get those notifications as soon as anything is announced. And with that, I'm going to call it an evening. I will be back here next week. Same Mythic time, same Mythic channel. Hope to see you then. Once again, congratulations to Four Horsemen Studios and the team behind the Mythic Legions Tactics War of the Aether Blade campaign, everyone at Great Hall Game Studios. Great accomplishment with what you guys pulled off with that Kickstarter. Super excited for that. Lots of new news coming out, lots of more news coming out. Stay tuned. There's going to be a lot of cool stuff to enjoy as part of this Mythic community. Until next time, I can't wait for that conversation.